Welcome to First Things First. I'm Jenna Wolfe on a Monday morning. That's the Hall of Famer Cris Carter. This is Nick Wright. Great weekend of sports to talk about. Great start for Kirk Cousins with the Vikings. Sam Darnold looking good in his NFL debut with the Jets. It's been a long time since we said something great is going on with the Jets. But we are going to start with the thing that had the three of us, and I'm sure most of you, captivated all weekend long, and that was Tiger Woods. A year ago, Tiger was all but done. Scandal and surgeries had done him in. Little did we know Tiger was preparing for one of the greatest comeback stories in all of sports. Yesterday at the PGA Championship, he was incredible. Shooting a 64, finishing 14 under for the tournament. Shot his lowest score ever in the final round of a major. Lowest ever final round of a major, finishing second behind Brooks Koepka. Here's Tiger Woods after the round on Sunday.
I didn't know how many tournaments I'd play this year or if I'd even play. And so each tournament brought about its own challenges. And I didn't know what the number was going to be this year. I didn't know how I was going to play. And so at the beginning of the year, if you just said, yeah, I would have a chance, legit chance to win the last two major championships, with what swing? I didn't have a swing at the time. You know, I had no speed. I didn't have a golf swing. I didn't have, my short game wasn't quite there yet. You know, my putting was okay, but, I hadn't played in 2 years. And so it's been a hell of a process this year. But I'm in uncharted territory because no one's ever had a fused spine hitting it like I'm hitting it. So I've had to try and figure this out on my own. And it's been really, really hard. It's a lot harder than people think. And I'm just very pleased at what I've done so far. And now, to be part of the Ryder Cup conversation, going from where I've come from to now in the last year, it's been pretty cool.
I mean, how refreshing for Tiger to be able to finish in second place and yet still glean so much from his performance and so much perspective from where he came from. CeCe, how close was Tiger Woods to winning his 15th major?
Well, he was a lot closer than we would have ever suspected him to be at this point. Tiger, on reflecting on it, starting the season almost 700th ranking in the world, and now in the last two majors on Sunday to be a shot or two out of the lead in the British Open, in the Open Championship, having the lead there. Yeah, he didn't expect that. But you have to go back to where he started from. Tiger and the people around him, and talking to Tiger's agent, they really didn't know. They didn't know if Tiger Woods was going to play golf ever again. He had a surgery that no golfer has ever played on the tour with, a fused back. So now we've been able to see him about three-quarters of the way through a season. As he said, he doesn't have a swing coach now. Tiger Woods is trying to figure this out on his own. He's reinvented his swing 3 or 4 times, and now he's trying to reinvent his body. But his brain is the only thing that he does on the level that won him 14 majors. And that's what kept him in this tournament. And that's what will allow him to win another golf tournament and another major. It was exciting to see. Tiger Woods didn't lose this golf tournament. No. That's why he was so happy, all right? Brooks Koepka won it with his outstanding play. Tiger has never played this well in a major and did not win. But it speaks to where we are as far as the PGA Tour right now, the overall quality of players and the depth of players that you have to be able to get through to be able to win a major, Nick.
See, what you just said there, you said to me last night on the phone. You said Tiger's never played this well in a major and not won. So I looked into the numbers on that a little bit. No one has ever shot this low of a score without winning a major. No one has ever had a better second-place score as far as 266. Now, part of that's it's a par 70, not a par 72. Right. Mm-hmm. But no one has ever had fewer shots in a 4-round major championship without hoisting the trophy. I said Sunday morning on Twitter, I thought Tiger had to go out and shoot a 64. I thought a 64 is what he would need to end up forcing a playoff. It seemed like Tiger thought he needed around a 64 with the way he was attacting attempting to attack the course. He went out and shot a 64, and Brooks Koepka, who's just been extraordinary the last 2 years, he's now won 3 of 7 majors, 3 of 6. He didn't play in one of those.
He didn't play in Augusta.
The Masters, right. So he's won 3 of the last 6 majors he's played in. Koepka went out, and while other guys were fading and Tiger was surging, he stayed steady. But the way he did it is what makes it, to me, all the more remarkable. I've never seen a front nine like we saw Sunday. I've never seen a player go an opening 9 holes, not hit a single fairway, and be 3 under for that stretch of golf.
And also, being in a major, when you miss the fairways, it's more penal. So what he did was remarkable.
Go ahead, Jenna.
No, I was going to ask for, I mean, I was watching and following both of you guys tweet about it, and it seemed like whatever he was doing seemed to stand out. Mike, I was curious what stood out to you the most, but I assume for you is the fact that he wasn't hitting the fairways, still managed to keep his wits about him and play the game that he wants.
And I'll take only minor issue with one thing Chris said as far as man, it seems to me his iron play, it might not be what it was when he had the Tiger Slam, but he's still the best iron player in the world. I believe. I think his iron play and his creativity.
Yeah. Tiger Woods and traveling around the country, watching Tiger play. I've probably been to 15 to 20 majors. I'm talking about watching how he hits the ball. He does nothing better than he did before.
Sure.
His iron play, it was ridiculous. That's how you win 14 majors, though. Like, now we're right in the moment, so people think, wow, his iron play. No, his iron play was better. He drove the ball better. He putted the ball better. His short game was better. That's the Tiger Woods that had golf captivated. Now, his iron play is getting close to what it was. His putter sometimes shows you glimpses, yes, but ultimately, none of those things are up to where he was. He put things together yesterday, but it will all go back to 2 simple holes. Hole number 1 and hole number 2 of this championship, where he started bogey, double bogey. And those 3 shots right there end up costing him a chance to win major number 15.
When we look at this from 30,000 feet, what we also see, though, is the last 2 majors combined of all the players who played in both of them, who has the lowest score in relation to par? It's Tiger Woods. Now, he didn't win either one of them. Like, he tied for 6th in the British, and he ended up solo 2nd in this one. But he is playing. There have been times in the attempted comebacks, the stops and starts, even earlier this year, where we were kind of grading Tiger on a curve, and a justifiable curve, because as CC talks about all the time, first golfer to ever compete at a high level on tour with a fuse back. It's not grading him on a curve to say he played well enough to win this tournament. Like, yes. he absolutely, and in most cases, if Koepka wasn't something of a cyborg yesterday, I mean, it seemed like every drive was piped down the middle 330 yards. Right. We saw Justin Thomas have the Tiger effect and fade. We saw Gary Woodland was playing next to Tiger Woods. They didn't show him on TV except for his opening shot.
And then, you never saw him again.
His final shot. Like, Woodland was a non-factor. But Koepka was spectacular, and he's now got 3 majors, which, by the way, as you pointed out, C, that's the same amount as Jordan Spieth.
Yes.
It's only 1 shy of Rory. Like,
yes.
Koepka all of a sudden has passed the Dustin Johnson, Justin Thomas, those young guns, as arguably the best young player on tour.
Does it feel like Tiger Woods is maybe one player faltering down the back 9 or whatever, or Tiger Woods is maybe a stroke or 2 away from finally putting this all together?
I mean, he's very, very close. The thing that Tiger has to do is go back to what he did before, and that's how can he get off to a lead. If Tiger Woods was in the lead and he had shot 64, all of them would have folded. So, and when you're from the lead, like it's suffocating. I mean, just imagine if it was the roles reversed. Imagine if Koepka was playing 2 groups ahead of Tiger. And because Koepka was the only one who wasn't affected by the noise, the movement, even the reporters. All the reporters were following Tiger. They had to go backwards to be able to follow the winner for the last couple holes. So Tiger is very, very close, I think, in his mind. And that's the part that he's very, very proud of today, because Tiger Woods did not have his best golf game. And people used to get upset before when Tiger used to win. And they asked him, Tiger, what kind of game did you have? And once Tiger said, I had my C game. All right, Tiger's going to find his A game again, and he's definitely going to be in the winner's circle. And it's a breath of fresh air to the tour. Justin Thomas, he spoke about it afterwards and saying this was the first time the Tiger effect, he could feel it on the golf course when he was there. And that was a tremendous compliment to the atmosphere there in St. Louis this weekend.
When you say get his A game, in your eyes, I'd imagine, I'm curious, though, the part of his game that if he's going to win a major, he would need to clean up the most is off the tee. is the driving accuracy. And yesterday, it wasn't even just with the driver or the 3-wood. Sometimes it was spraying irons. Like, that's the one part of his game that I know he was always somewhat erratic off the tee, but he could bomb.
But he was a lot better than he was. Now, and he was the longest player on tour. He's not that, so he doesn't have the distance advantage. And the way the golf courses are set up, it's hard to score when you don't hit the fairway. And so it's not only his driver, it's also his 3-wood, because now if he can hit one of those 2 clubs, even his 3-wood, he can carry that 275, 280. He can play. He couldn't even hit that yesterday because he couldn't trust it. And it's not that he doesn't know where it's going to go. It's sometimes he's missing left and sometimes he's missing right. And he's not used to that. He only likes to be able to miss one way. And once he figures that out, then we'll see him win.
Tiger Woods, probably the happiest he's ever been, coming in second place. Coming up on the other side, does Kirk Cousins make the Vikings Super Bowl contenders? That is next. This is First Things First. All right, new topic now, NFL quarterbacking debuts. The Vikings rolled out their new man at the helm of the huddle. His name is Kirk Cousins, facing the Broncos, and Cousins needed just one drive to make his mark, completing all 4 of his pass attempts for 42 yards and a touchdown. Looked good, felt good, wasn't in there for long, but it was enough. See, how much better does Kirk Cousins make the Minnesota Vikings?
Well, Kurt's a quality quarterback. You know he's more than a competent starter. He's been very, very healthy. This is the best personnel overall that he's played with throughout his career. So I think he's going to be very good. But let's not get the Vikings. We kind of, because of Kurt's money and all of it being guaranteed, we kind of forget what's the mantra of this team going to be. And it's their defense. I mean, their defense is stacked. They're not going to give up a whole bunch of points. They play in a beautiful stadium indoors. That's going to be able to help them, because Kurt doesn't have one of the biggest arm. He has more than strong enough arm as an NFL quarterback, but his overall accuracy and his ability for the coordinator to feel comfortable with him to call any pass play. All right? Last year, I know people fell in love with the quarterback and everything, and it was like, oh, he's the MVP and everything, but they were limited. All right, he's height challenged, and he throws the ball into coverage. That's Case Keenum. That's what he's done. He's never done it in the NFL for a long period of time. Kurt has been consistent. If he plays the same way that he did in Washington, the Vikings, yes, they have upgraded at quarterback, and they only need to get a little bit better. They were in the NFC Championship last year, so does it make them that much better? The Vikings think so.
The questions for the Vikings in the passing game are going to be offensive line related, and we can talk more about that in a moment. But there's one play in particular that I saw from Kirk that is simply a pass Case Keenum couldn't make. And it wasn't the touchdown, it was the pass to Stephon Diggs that led to the touchdown up the far right side of the field where, I mean, it was perfect ball placement. It was, I mean, what I'm seeing here is he sees the rush coming, he sees that the guy doesn't even have a full step on the corner, and he puts it right there. See, what do you see?
Yeah, but he gets off number one. Thielen's the number one receiver coming on the crosser. You have a combination, you have a crossing route, and then Diggs is going to make a stutter, go move up the sideline. He knows the crosser's taken away. He puts the ball only where Stephon Diggs. So the flight of the football, the quick read, and that's going to become important this year with that offensive line, the question marks around that offensive line.
I just want to stay on this play for a moment, because if he waits just another beat to where the receiver be in the end zone, then the safety's there. Like, that's the only, he threw it the first moment that the receiver had the corner beat, and the last moment to where the safety's not even going to be in the frame when he gets to the ball. That is a perfect throw. That isn't a guy, I'm sure it was a great route, see, but that is a perfect throw right there. That's what they paid him the money for.
We talk about the quarterback, but how much better did the team get overall? And was there room to really get that much better from last year? Obviously, they have Delvin Cook back, but with Kirk Cousins there, tell me how much better overall the team got.
Well, they got to get better than last year offensively, because if they can support their defense, it only makes the team better. If you look at the teams that we see in the NFC that we think are going to be at the top, that being the Rams, that being the Saints, that being Philadelphia, Dallas, Atlanta, Carolina, all these teams have a good defensive front. And that's the biggest problem for the Vikings. Their weakest unit happens to be their offensive line. So, yes, they have improved at quarterback, but they have not gotten better at offensive line because they've already lost a starter and one of their best offensive linemen, the center, Pat Efron. He is not even practicing yet. He's on PUP. He's going to come. He had 2 off-season surgeries, so he should be healthy in a couple weeks, but he hasn't even started practicing yet.
When Chris Canty's out here talking about the Colts, last week, and he said, you know, one of the reasons he liked them drafting Quentin Nelson is that guard, center, guard, up the middle combo. So the Vikings right guard, Mike Rimmers, he's not practicing. Pat Eflin, he's not practicing. And Nick Easton, who arguably was their best offensive lineman heading into the year, he's done for the season. You add to that the tragic death, untimely death of their offensive line coach, Tony Sperano. And now this is a team that only going into camp, people that watch the show, if you're not in Minnesota, don't know this. Every Friday, C does a hit with a local Minnesota television station, the Fox station in Minnesota. And all summer, when they were asking about the Vikings, they'd talk about Case Keenum. C would mention the offensive line. They'd talk about Stephon Diggs. C would mention the offensive line. That was before Sperano's tragic death and the loss of Nick Easton. This was their biggest issue if everyone was healthy. That is the only reason to me the Vikings wouldn't duplicate what they did last year.
Right, and people won't know Nick Easton, his name, but he is the best lineman that they had. Last year, Pro Football's Focus, there's 5 guards or centers that played over 400 snaps. Nick was one of those. He didn't give up a sack last season in 400 snaps and only gave up 3 hurries. So when you lose that quality of center early, it will be part of the storyline in me talking about the Vikings and how they're able to move forward.
But is Kirk Cousins a big enough upgrade to sort of work around that until they can shore up that line?
Well, listen, I don't know that they're going to be able to shore up the line. Like there's always a team or two that has a guy that was undrafted or a 7th-round pick that from a couple years ago that comes in and he's excellent. But the reality is they're going to have to work with what they have. But this is why you pay that type of money for quarterbacks. Case Keenum, as good as his story was, and we saw him making plays running around, he needs things to be going a certain way. Kirk Cousins, you expect that he can deal with. He's got excellent wide receivers. I think Dalvin Cook's a very good player. You're not going to have the perfect team, right? We talk about this with Dallas. He's got the offensive line, the running back, doesn't have the wide receivers. You pay Kirk to be able to make do with it. What I'm curious about is if Philly's right here, if Philly is the team everyone's chasing in the NFC, like who got better this offseason? The Rams, who added seemingly everything except the quarterback, right? They were stuck with their quarterback. Or the Vikings, who they get Dalvin Cook back, but didn't really add much aside from the quarterback, right? Like, does Kirk Cousins, is that one position enough of an upgrade to make them the clear-cut second favorite in the NFC, which is clearly the toughest conference?
All right, we got to take another break. Coming up, will we see Sam Darnold under center for the Jets in Week 1? That's next. This is First Things First. All right, we're moving on so quickly now. Time for stories to start your morning. Despite being connected to the Chinese Basketball League, Dwayne Wade reaffirmed his commitment to the Miami Heat next season. Wade said, quote, "If I play basketball this year, it'll be in a Heat uniform." Nick Wright, how much do you think Dwayne Wade has left in the tank?
Not much, but whenever he runs out of gas, it should be wearing a Heat uniform. He got something left in the tank. Now, he's kind of like me, known to be like, I can probably make it. And sometimes you end up on the side of the road out of gas. But at least he's going to do it in the friendly confines of Wade County.
Miami.
So, yeah, I mean, I'm glad he's not going to China for $25 million for a 3-year deal. That's what was reportedly offered. Stay in Miami, probably get a job in the organization after. Greatest player long-term in the history of their franchise.
Yeah, I'd like to see him finish there. There's no way he's going to be playing basketball in 3 years. So, you know, I don't know what they thought they were going to be getting there, but they were going to get ripped off. So go back to the Heat, D-Wade. One more year.
Absolutely. And he had some nice playoff moments this year for them.
All right, to the NFL now. The Browns continue to court Dez Bryant. Tyrod Taylor said, quote, "That would be awesome," when asked about the Browns adding Dez. CC, would Dez be an awesome fit in Cleveland?
I'm about as much talent on the roster as possible. If you look at the Josh Gordon not knowing if he's going to come back, Antonio Callaway being a young receiver who has had a lot of problems in the past, I would go with Dez. I believe that him and Landry can get it done. And if your quarterback wants a guy, hey, there's a good chance that working out, that relationship, that chemistry, it's easier to do when the quarterback puts in the request.
If Tyrod was the only quarterback on the roster that mattered, I would say yes. But I've seen the story of Dez with a young quarterback that's working through some things. And I'm typically talent trumps all. With everything I read from Dez on Twitter this past week, with the fact that the GM couldn't get a hold of him, and from what seems like a little bit potentially combustible wide receiver room, for all those reasons, the Browns, to me, are not the right fit for Dez Bryant. They might be the only team offering him a job, though, so I don't know that he can work.
Yeah, I don't think the wide receiver room is combustible. Josh Gordon's not there. Callaway is a rookie. He don't have no speaking part. Landry has taken over that. He is the dude.
Speaking of combustible, training camp fights. The Jets had a brawl in camp over the weekend against Washington. The fight reportedly started when Jets corner Tremaine Johnson cheap shot at Washington tackle Morgan Moses. All right, see, put this in perspective, please. How big of a deal are training camp fights?
Man, if you bring the teams together in the NFL, guys are tired of practicing against their own guys. It's always some type of altercation. It's not something you'd like to see, but if you bring NFL teams together, you're going to see a couple of these. It's part of doing business and part of summer training camp.
This one got a little ugly in the regard. The fans started fighting each other in the stands as well. It flared up a few times, but one of the reasons, go ahead, C.
Oh, that's the Jets fans. That's the only way they're going to win. Jets fans get a couple wins in the stands.
You got to get a win in the stands. I mean, listen, coaches tend to like these practices sometimes more than actual preseason games.
Yes.
Because you can do work and it's competitive. But you know something that is going to happen. This is on the more extreme end of a training camp fight just because of the number of players involved. There wasn't a lot of guys just walking away from it like one Cris Carter might have done in his playing days. Y'all can have that little training camp fight. I got places to be.
Yeah, no, you'll see me. I come up in this video.
Okay. All right, a few more training camp fights here. The Jags suspended Dante Fowler and Jalen Ramsey for a week for violating team rules. Fowler got into a fight at training camp. The fight was recorded by a reporter. Ramsey was not happy with the reporter, tweeting, "You know you messed up, right? LOL, if you want war, we got some for you. And I know the rest of you, you know who you are going to read this too. So just know, hashtag lame-ass reporters." Nick, what do you make of this suspension?
I think a one-week suspension for Jalen Ramsey tweeting that tells me, like, there is more to this than simply the tweet. That behind the scenes, the Jags have talked with Jalen about, listen, we love how intense you are. We love what a great player you are. But you are the best player on this football team, and we need you to keep it inside the dotted lines to a degree. And we need, whether that's with teammates, whether that's with the media, whatever it is, we can't have you being as exuberant, that's maybe the wrong word, as outspoken as you've been in the past. Because otherwise, a 1 week, not a 1 game suspension, 1 week, we'll see you a week from today, that's, what's that, a fifth of training camp? A fourth of training camp? That's significant. Now, I know he doesn't really need the work. He's a great player already, but it speaks to maybe a percolating bigger situation with this football team.
Yeah, I think it's a good observation. The 1 week that he does get suspended, though, I believe is a little more important week because they're going tomorrow to Minnesota. They play Minnesota Saturday, but they're going to Minnesota to practice, have joint practices with the Vikings. So I know their staff was looking forward to seeing Jalen Ramsey matched up against Thielen and Diggs for several days. So that work right there, he really could have used. But I think you're making a great point as far as the overall observation. You can't just consider this just to be one off like some of the other training camp fights, because you don't suspend a guy unless he does something really, really bad, unless there's been some type of warning system. I believe they have that there. Tom Coughlin runs that organization. Doug Marrone is a disciplinarian. They are not going to let this young defensive dominate team take their personalities take over the franchise. So I could see that being part of the suspension. Also, Dante Fowler, he was already suspended this offseason for his conduct.
I don't mean to laugh. Dante Fowler is going to miss the first week of the season because he was driving. He got in a verbal altercation with a guy. He followed the guy into a parking lot and allegedly hit the guy, stepped on the guy's glasses, and threw the guy's groceries into a lake. So for that reason, Dante Fowler's already going to miss week 1 of the season. You've got, and he's a guy that's also, by the way, unlike Jalen, been a little disappointing given his draft positioning. And the thing that stuck out to me about Fowler, he wasn't fighting an offensive lineman. Dante Fowler was fighting Yannick Ngakoue. Those are 2 D linemen fighting each other, which struck me as a little odd. But you mentioned Coughlin.
Yes.
How much of this, Coughlin, you've told me stories about Coughlin. It was like your toes here, your back arched here. It wasn't, everyone says 5 minutes early and you're still late, but it was everything.
That's who Tom Coughlin was. Now, he made some slight adjustments with the Giants, was able to get those 2 Super Bowls, but Tom Coughlin is about discipline. And I can... no one has told me this, but I can guarantee you Tom Coughlin was disappointed in his departure with the New York Football Giants and the way that they acted without discipline. OBJ, the outburst on the sideline. People behind the scenes blame Tom Coughlin, and at no point in Tom Coughlin's career did he have players that acted that way. So to see him running this franchise, to see that this franchise is a lot like Carolina. Remember, Josh Norman got into the fight with Cam Newton at training camp. They didn't renew his contract when they had an opportunity. And Richard Sherman, what he and how he continued to say things with Pete Carroll and that team, it eroded the relationship that he had there in the locker room and there with the media. Him end up going away to San Francisco. So I think that people in the NFL, they've seen these other situations. In Jacksonville, they don't want that same behavior to continue with Jalen.
And what they don't have in Jacksonville that you had certainly in Seattle, and I would argue in Carolina, is a franchise quarterback who can be a calming force or a leader of men.
Yes.
In Jacksonville, like Blake Bortles the quarterback, but the leaders of that team are on defense. And the leader of that team, it's him, it's Calais Campbell. They lost Aaron Colvin, one of their veteran corners. Like they have A.J. Boye, but it's really him and Calais Campbell. You need them to act however you think is appropriate. They need to act as such. The Coughlin thing, though, I think is really intriguing because the moment people remember, and that Coughlin got heavily criticized for, was the Josh Norman-Odell Beckham fight when people said, why didn't Odell get kicked out? And if he didn't get kicked out, why didn't Coughlin bench him? And Coughlin famously didn't bench him. And so I do feel like his fingerprints are on this to a degree, making sure he keeps things in line.
All right, moving along here. Question for you. Is it possible the Jets don't have a quarterback problem? I mean, it's funny to think there's a position the Jets aren't worried about, but number 3 overall pick Sam Darnold looked pretty good Friday night, throwing for 96 yards and a touchdown, and Teddy Bridgewater looked pretty good Friday night, leading the Jets to scores on both of his possessions. On Sunday, Darnold took more first-team reps in practice. CeCe, how much more does Sam Darnold have to do now if he wants to start Week 1?
Oh, he needs to be able to repeat it. He needs to be a little more consistent also in practice. Like, it's not over. The work is not done. I mean, my goodness, like 18 attempts throwing the football. No, that doesn't anoint him anything. He got off to a good start. The game plan they had around him was really good. And they took some chances throwing the ball down the field. I like the speed for which he played the game with as far as him recognizing where he wanted to go with the ball and deciding to go there. Very, very accurate with the football. And also the line did a decent job as far as protecting him going forward. Will they have a running game? Will their playmakers be consistent enough to make enough plays? But I'm not surprised at all. I thought Sam Darnold was going to be a star in the NFL, and he is off to a good start. And it started in practice. He's having a good training camp, even though he was late, and got off to a good start in preseason game number 1.
There's a reason he was considered the surest thing in this NFL draft. From the quarterback position, I should say. That of all the quarterbacks, he was considered the safest pick. Maybe not the upside of Baker, maybe not the exciting playmaking of Lamar, but the guy least likely to be a bust was Sam Darnold. And I don't know if he's going to start Week 1 or not. You can make an argument that he should because weeks 4, 5, 6, they play some really tough defenses, and you'd like to see him get some experience before that. But you can also make an argument he's going to wait because they play their Thursday night game in Week 3. So it would be 3 games in a short period of time for him, 17 days, I think, if he does start Week 1. But I just want to go backwards a little bit and remind everyone how the Jets got him. They had the 6th pick of the draft, and they decided they were going to package that pick with 3 second-rounders, 2 this year and 1 next year, to move up to get the guy that I believe they would have taken if they had the 1st overall pick of the draft. So Jets fans last year were kind of upset when they were winning games because they knew they weren't going to be a playoff team. They didn't really, and they wanted, I think, Darnold, but they wanted their 1 pick to get the quarterback. They ended up winning enough games to have the 6th pick, and they still got the guy that I think they would have drafted had they gone 1-15. So I think he's going to be a very quality player in this league. They just have to weigh, is it harder for him to deal with 3 games in 17 days? Or I guess, I'm sorry, I'm saying that wrong. It would be 3 games in 10 days, pardon me. 3 games over the first week and a half, 2.5 weeks of the season, pardon me. Or is it harder for him to deal with his first NFL competition being the really tough stretch of defenses they have in the month of October? Like, that's for the Jets staff to figure out, because they obviously don't have the offensive line or the receivers.
Yeah, to me, it doesn't become very, very difficult when you have young quarterbacks. If a young quarterback is close to the same as the veteran quarterback, it doesn't make sense not to put the young guy in there and get him. Even though you're playing a short, in a short window, you're playing a number of games, but that's also 3 games he wouldn't get experience. So. Sure. If they're close, you're going to go with the young guy, because Teddy Bridgewater, Josh McCown, these guys have been in the league for years. And if a rookie is playing as good as you after 4 or 5 weeks of training camp, it's a tremendous indicator for the coaching staff who they're going to go with.
So does Bridgewater then become the tradable asset in all of this?
I think people get carried away trying to trade. The Jets have been looking for quarterbacks for years. Now, if you do have 2 on the roster, why trade one away? Like, do we think Sam Darnold is not going to get injured? All right? Like, we don't think he's going to get nicked? Like, with that offensive line?
So you'll keep 3 with Josh McCown then? Or you think they should?
Josh McCown is there as a mentor. He is not there to play football. Like, his money is guaranteed. Teach him the playbook. Teach him how to be a pro. But Teddy Bridgewater, the longer you keep Teddy Bridgewater, the more value he has, because right now, no one's looking for a quarterback. So why try to trade him? And it's not like you got a surplus of talent. Like, get as much talent on the roster before you try to trade some people away.
And it should be noted, the reason Jenna brings up Teddy is, I mean, we saw him preseason action. First time we've seen Teddy take significant snaps.
Yeah, they were trying to trade Teddy before the preseason games.
They said his value, it's got to
be careful.
But Teddy played well, is what I was going to say.
Great.
People didn't watch it. He was 7 of 8, 85 yards, a touchdown, a nearly perfect quarterback rating. That was good to see just as a football fan, even though it's preseason. I get it. It's good to see as a football fan, because Teddy, we didn't know if he was ever going to get in last year. When he finally did get in, he threw an interception right on his first play. It was a tipped ball interception. So to see Teddy get out on the football field and have some level of success, that was really good to see.
All right, we're going to take a break. Coming up on the other side, are the Denver Broncos quarterback struggles bad news for John Elway? We'll explain next on First Things First. Back here on First Things First, Super Bowl champ Cris joining the show, getting excited. Weeks away from the season starting.
It's about to go down, Jenna.
It's about to go down.
Wait for week 1 of the regular season.
Right?
Can't wait.
What?
Can't get here fast enough.
What up, Steve?
Man, you're going to get Jenna all screwed up, man. You start teaching her that.
The countdown? The countdown.
Is it not 3 weeks? Am I off? Is it 2 weeks?
Right.
It's going down. Now, watch how that gets into
She's going to try to use that in the wrong place.
I got to go to the bathroom. It's going down.
It's getting cheaper, right?
Probably could have kept that one to yourself.
Awesome. Thank you for the vote of confidence.
You got it, Jenna.
Awesome.
I got your back
Working
here.
on the
You're gonna
lingo.
Use it perfectly later in the show.
Well, let's get
Probably
ready
not.
for this to go down right now. Quick recap for those of you tuning in for the first time today. I was seated front row center on the Case Keenum bandwagon last season as Keenum helped carry the Vikings to the NFC Championship game. Broncos sign him, and, well, let's just say there's room on the bandwagon. Keenum completing only 1 of his 4 passes Saturday against the Vikings for 5 yards. Cris, how much does John Elway have riding on Case Keenum this year?
Well, he's got a lot riding on Case Keenum from the standpoint of you're not going to be very competitive unless Case Keenum puts together a really good season, something comparable to what we saw with him in Minnesota last year. The only problem with that is there's a lot less talent on that Denver Broncos team than there is on the Minnesota Vikings. And I'm looking at the offensive side of the ball, and you do like some pieces that the Broncos have, but the sum of the parts is not equal to what Case Keenum had in Minnesota. So I'm looking at what they're doing as a team. I don't look at the Denver Broncos as a team that's going to be very competitive in the AFC West, and that's not a strong division to start with. But they're in this situation now where they went 5-11 last year, in large part because the general manager hasn't drafted well. John Elway's last couple of drafts have been terrible. His best drafts were the first 2 that he had when he became the general manager of the Denver Broncos. And guess what happens when you draft well? You're a very competitive team. They won the Super Bowl 3 years later in 2015. So, I mean, it's a situation now. This is a roster that's depleted of talent in large part because the general manager hasn't done well. They won the Super Bowl. What happens when you win the Super Bowl? People want your coaches and your players. And so there's been an exodus from the Denver Broncos in the talent on that roster, and John Elway hasn't done a great job of replacing it.
And whether it's fair or not, if you're the general manager and you played quarterback, we are going to pay extra attention to the quarterbacks that you pick.
We assume you can pick them well.
When he got there, they had Tim Tebow, and he did an excellent job of eschewing Tebow, getting Peyton Manning to sign. They're a little fortunate nature in that the Houston Texans didn't want Peyton Manning. The Broncos were Peyton's second choice behind the Texans. They get him. They make a Super Bowl almost instantly. They win one, as you mentioned. But since he got there, he's drafted 5 quarterbacks. Brock Osweiler, Zach Dysert, Trevor Siemian, Paxton Lynch, who, by the way, we're going to talk about Keenum, but Lynch was in this game. He was dreadful. And that was a first-round pick. And then Chad Kelly this year. Now, if you want to throw out the 7th-rounders, that's fine. But you've spent 2 premium draft picks, a second and a first, on Osweiler and Lynch, neither of whom, to me, appear to even be NFL backups. And what's the standard in Denver? Well, they had a losing season last year. The last time they had back-to-back losing seasons in Denver, which is insane, was 1971, 1972. This is a franchise. It's not just that they won the 2 Super Bowls with Elway, went to 5 with him, went to 2 more with Peyton Manning. There is not an organization, you could argue, in sports that has gone, 45 years without ever having a downtime. They've had a mediocre time, but they haven't had back-to-back losing seasons in almost 50 years. Like, that's the standard of the organization. Elway helped create that standard as a player, and now he's seeing the pressure, not the pressure, but the penalty of having to live up to it as the GM.
It's one of the great franchises. I think they lead the NFL still in number of consecutive sellouts that they have. They have great fan support. They have tremendous support from the ownership, even though there's some confusion or some things behind the scene about the ownership. The ownership is rich. They're not cash poor, so they're strong. They got a great stadium. So it's all set up for John Elway. All the history with the Broncos that's good, John Elway's been involved.
Yep.
That either as a player, when he was almost had the resume of Jim Kelly, but no, got that turned around, getting those 2 Super Bowls late in his career. And also, I don't think people give him enough credit because getting Peyton Manning to Denver, they were not the favorite to land Peyton Manning. And Peyton had tremendous question marks as far as his neck after several surgeries when he left the Colts. So I believe that John Elway, his history in Denver is secure. Now, he's just done a bad job with quarterbacks. And no one should think that throwing the football calculates to being able to pick quarterbacks. All right, and John has not done a good job of picking quarterbacks, but because of the support that he has there and because of what he did with Peyton Manning, getting them to those 2 Super Bowls, that gives him the ability that they're not going to get rid of John Elway. He's going to be able to make a mistake after mistake, I believe, because of his name there in the Denver area.
Well, Chris, let's talk about what they do have this year. Let's just talk about Case Keenum and Paxton Lynch, if those are your 1 and 2 guys. First of all, it was 1 outing, so let's not throw Case Keenum under the bus just yet, and that was it. But just talk to me just a little bit about what he's got there at that quarterback position.
Well, here's what I'll say. He's got 2 pretty good receivers in Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders. So if those guys...
No, they got 1 receiver. They got Emmanuel Sanders. We don't know what we got in Demaryius.
He might be trending the wrong way.
He's had 2 poor seasons, if we were just being honest. Emmanuel Sanders right now is the only one we would say a number 1 right today.
Oh, agreed. But, I mean, I'm looking at it through the lens of, okay, they're serviceable receivers.
Yes.
If you have a quarterback that's competent and that can get them the ball. The offensive line, they retooled it on the fly. They got Garrett Bowles with a high draft pick last year. They've got Matt Paradis at center. Ron Leary they bought over from the Cowboys. They got Jared Valdir from the Cardinals. They've got a serviceable offensive line. There's a question mark at the running back position with Devontae Booker. You don't know what you got there. The tight end position, they moved on from C.J. Anderson. There's a little bit to be desired from the tight end position. So it's not the supporting cast that Case had in Minnesota, and that's the big part of it. Also, I look at the defensive side of the ball. I don't think that Broncos defense is on the level talent-wise that the Minnesota Vikings defense was. They've got some playmakers, but it's not the same. So I don't know with the offensive and the defensive units that Case Keenum is going to have to work with, that they're going to be complementary enough to be able to elevate the play of their quarterback. I just don't see that happening.
Yeah, I think Case is a marginal starter in the NFL. I think if he is quarterback in your franchise, you are always looking to, how can I upgrade the quarterback position? He hadn't been consistent. He throws the ball in the coverage, but I wouldn't overreact to playing against the Vikings because the Vikings know him. You know what the Vikings did to him? We're going to mush rush him. All right, we're going to make him throw the ball from in the pocket. We're going to play man-to-man on the outside and suffocate these wide receivers because they have practice against Case.
That's a good
all right?
point.
They see Case. So that's exactly what they did against the Denver Broncos. So the Vikings are one of the best teams in the league. So I wouldn't overreact to just that limited number of plays that I saw.
It's totally fair, but what's also true is because if Case is just a marginal starting quarterback, then Elway did make another error at the position as far as he gave him $25 million guaranteed over 2 years. This isn't just a one-year commitment. This is next year, if they want to move on from Case Keenum, he still costs them $10 million cap dollars next season. We were just talking about Teddy Bridgewater. Now, I know Teddy had injury questions, and Case was better than Teddy last year. Teddy was $500,000 guaranteed. And you don't have – I know Paxton Lynch is on the roster, but they know he's only on the roster because he was a first-round pick.
That's it.
Paxton, if you go out there and you spike the ball every time, you have a passer rating of 39.6. Paxton's was 22.2 this weekend. Like, he played as poorly of a half of football as you can really play at that position. And so where the Broncos are right now, their silver lining for the season is they got Bradley Chubb. I don't think anyone thought going into the draft that the 5th overall pick, they were going to be able to get Bradley Chubb. A lot of people thought that was the best defensive player in the draft. They compare him with Von Miller and potentially have a ferocious pass rush. They still have Chris Harris, even though they don't have Aqib Talib anymore. But to be able to win the way they're accustomed to with what I think is going to be not only a bottom half, but probably a bottom third of the league offense, you need to have a dominant Jags of 2017, Broncos of 2015 type of defense. Even with Bradley Chubb, I don't think that's what they have there anymore.
All right, Chris, stick around. Coming up, the Giants know what they need to do to be successful. We'll tell you what they said. That's next on First Things First. Back here on First Things First with Chris Canty, talking about your former team, Chris, the Giants. Despite seeing some flashes from number 2 overall pick Saquon Barkley, the offense struggled in its preseason loss to the Browns on Thursday. New head coach Pat Shurmur said the Giants have, quote, plenty to learn moving forward with the season less than 4 weeks away. Canty, what's the key to the Giants' success on offense this season?
It has to be the offensive line. That's where it starts for me, because had it not been for the Seattle Seahawks, the Giants would have had the worst offensive line in the NFL in 2017. So they put a lot of money, a lot of draft capital into retooling that offensive line, signed Nate Solder. At the time, made him the highest paid tackle in the NFL. They drafted Will Hernandez with the high second-round pick. So the idea is they're going to try to get this thing back on track with an explosive offense. The offensive line just has to be average. It has to be serviceable. If it's not, it's going to be a struggle for the Giants. They got great skill position players. I mean, you can stack it up. Man for man, they're one of the best groups at the skill position players in the NFL. But it all starts
there on that offensive line.
It all starts with the offensive line, because if you can't block anybody, then the quarterback can't get the ball to those receivers. The running game is going to be a struggle.
Well, let's just – oh, sorry, go ahead.
And if they can't block anybody, then Eli's got no shot. Like, that was what, as critical as I've been about Eli, that's what was not his fault last year, was how many times by the time he could look to his first option, if that guy wasn't open, when he's trying to look to his second, he's having to fall down because a sack is coming.
He led the NFL in pass attempts with less than 2.5 seconds from the pocket.
It's the exact point. It is the perfect statistical note to the point I'm making. Like, you watched it and you saw Eli was constantly under duress. So I looked into 2 years ago, when the offensive line was a little bit better, when Odell was healthy, when the Giants that was a team whose strength was their defense, but Eli played well enough to get them double-digit wins, get them to the playoffs. And I said, how were they winning these games? Eli was excellent in the first half of games and then good enough while the defense suffocated you in the second half of games. Also, in their wins, Eli played clean football games. In their losses is when he had a disproportionate number of his total interceptions for the season. I think it was 16 2 years ago. Were in those 6 losses that they had. So, like, that's the path for them, is that they jump out to an early lead. Eli plays a clean football game because this is the most, in my eyes, offensive talent Eli Manning's ever had. It's the most offensive talent of a Giants team potentially in my memory, because as you say, when they've won, it's because they've had great running game and great defense. They got better wide receivers on this team and pass catchers than I remember.
They have a good tight end who has some potential in Evan Ingram, okay? They have a superstar in Odell Beckham. I don't want to get into this is the best group because the other guys, I mean, what have they proven?
Can
Sterling
I include Saquon Barkley as the pass catcher, though? Like, it's part of the math there?
Yeah, but that's unproven, though.
Okay, sure.
I mean, I don't see we're going to transfer his highlights from Penn State. Like, Odell Beckham is the only dependable receiver that they have. And from a dependability standpoint, I would go with Evan Ingram. He stepped up last year, even more so than Sterling Shepard. People talk about Sterling Shepard as if he has all these 1,000-yard seasons now. I still need to see some things, all right? Because I'm going to tell you, like Barkley, all right? Sterling Shepard, where'd he go to school? Oklahoma. How many receivers from Oklahoma have done well in the NFL?
Not a whole.
Wait on it.
It won't be okay.
Wait on it.
So these things, they do matter to me. Where you went to school, how does that transfer over? Because what says that he's going to be the guy that turn around the reputation of Oklahoma receivers? I'm not saying he's going to be bad. I'm just saying that he should do it on the field before we give him credit for it. Last year, Evan Ingram, I thought, was spectacular with no type of help. Bad offensive line, which all those stats and stuff are reported. He had some amazing plays. He was able to stay focused when they were totally out of contention.
By the midway point of the season, he was their #1 receiving option. Odell's out. Brandon Marshall's out. He was their #1 receiving threat as a second-year tight end.
And besides their right tackle, which Eric Flowers, like, we can't not have a Giants discussion without talking about him. So for me, these other supporting players become prominent. How good is Cody Lattimore? He might end up starting outside. Now, he was a disappointment in Denver. Now, you guys are saying this is the best wide receiving core. We don't know what we're going to get out of him. He needs to have a good season on the outside. So Shepard, which I believe he is primarily a slot receiver, so he can stay in the slot. And I believe another one, the big question mark, is my dude from Ohio State. Not Eli Manning, Eli Apple at cornerback. If all of these guys are able to put together some seasons, then the Giants are going to have a chance. So we're talking about, oh, man, what about the offense? Oh, I'm not worried. Man, they got huge question marks at positions where they have spent high draft capital on potential, and we need to see that potential played out on the field, Chris.
Well, CC, let's start with the one that's not a question mark, and you said it off the top, Odell Beckham Jr., proven commodity. To me, he's the one that sets the table for the entire offense just because he dictates front and coverage. So you can't drop that 8th man down in the box to slow down the running game just because you got to make sure you got a safety over top of Odell Beckham Jr. So with that being said, you should have one-on-one opportunities for the other pass catchers in that offense. Evan Ingram, Sterling Shepard, even Saquon Barkley to a degree.
This is what they're going to see. They're going to see a 7-man box. They're not going to let Barkley beat them, and they know their offensive line is not good. So they're going to put a number count to make the Giants make a decision. Either Eli Manning going to throw the ball to Ingram or one of those other receivers, because 7 plus 2 on Beckham, it's one-on-one coverage on the rest of the field. It should be that simple for the Giants this season.
It should be, and that's why I say it comes down to the offensive line being able to provide time for Eli Manning to work the football to those other guys. Because Evan Ingram and Sterling Shepard, there are not a lot of pass concepts where they're going to be the #1 option. So it's going to take Eli a little bit of time, more than he had last year. The running game, Saquon Barkley, they're going to be inside, outside zone. It's not going to be one of those old school lead weak power road type of gap blocking schemes. They're going to use the zone running game because Saquon Barkley is going to have to be his own blocker in a lot of situations. And you saw that in the first run that he had against the Cleveland Browns in the preseason game. So we all have to go back to the offensive line. And really, the preseason is going to be an important time for this group because they marched out 4 new starters from the group a year ago. So they need that time to gel, to develop that chemistry. So much of what the Giants' success is going to be on the offensive line because the offense has to set the table. You saw the issues with the defense in the preseason game against the Browns. No pass rush to speak of. Coverage was suspect. So it's got to be with the offense winning the day for the Giants, and it starts up front.
But wait, how do you feel about the offensive line? Quick question. Of the 3 marquee names that we're all going to talk about throughout the season, of Saquon and Eli and Odell, Which one of their personal success is going to correlate more to team success? Who has to have the bigger of the three breakout big years in order for this team to be successful?
Oh, to me, there's no question. Eli's got to have a good year.
Yes.
Like, I mean, to me, there's no doubt about it.
If Eli's cup run up over, it's going right into Odell and Barkley.
And
like,
it.
Yeah. If Eli has a good year, if Eli's even in contention for the Pro Bowl, the Giants will be in contention for the biggest year-over-year win improvement.
Yes.
Last year, the biggest improvement was the Jags went from 3 wins to 10 wins. If Eli has a good season, the Giants absolutely could be in that same bucket. Go from 3 wins to 10 wins. Like, that's a thing that could happen, but I think Eli can play poorly and Odell can still have 1,400 yards. I think Eli can play poorly and Saquon can still rush for 1,200. But it's everything else. It's how much does Evan Ingram improve in year 2? It's Sterling Shepard. They spent a second-round pick on him. And you're right that I am maybe more attracted to the flashes of momentary brilliance I've seen from him than actual sustained success. They obviously thought they needed more help last year. It's one of the reasons they brought in Brandon Marshall and tried to put Sterling in the slot. But, like, if Eli plays well, that also means the offensive line was better than it was last year. Like, he is going to be the barometer for this football team. No question about it in my eyes.
Thank you for listening to the First Things First podcast. Remember, leave us a review and tell us what you think. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts and catch us on FS1 Monday through Friday, 6:30 a.m. Eastern. For Cris Carter and Nick Wright, I'm Jenna Wolfe. So long, everybody.